All right. All right, and everyone who's joined us so far, thank you so much for being here. We're just giving it a few more minutes here. We got one more panelist still to arrive, and hopefully we'll get some more folks joining in as we go. But just bear with us while we wait. Oh, we already have our first question from Jill. She just fell off the couch for no reason. Will this panel help her address that? I don't see why not. You all have a great deal of experience with couches and falling off things. So I hope we can give her a satisfactory answer. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get things started, actually. Hopefully, John will be able to wander in the next few minutes. So welcome, everybody, to the Showmaking A to Z panel discussion. We're so excited you're here, and I'm really thrilled we're doing this. This session is really intended to take a look at everything that goes into making an improv show from the ground up, all the way through performances and beyond. So we have a group of five, so far four wonderful panelists who can all speak to their experiences with creating comedy and or improv shows, and all different backgrounds, which is wonderful. So to start out, I guess we can do some introductions here. I'm Sean, I'm the managing director at Huge Theater, and I'll be moderating the discussion today, but I'm mostly going to try to stay out of the way. And then I'll just let the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Rapp. I am co-founder and director of The Bearded Company.
Fantastic. Rita?
Hi, I'm Rita Boisma. I am the artistic director of Huge Theater.
Fantastic. Heather?
I'm Heather Meyer. I'm an independent producer of a variety of shows in a variety of locations.
Fantastic. And Emily?
I'm Emily Lindholm. I'm primarily a part of the Jorts Improv Group, and but also, like Heather, doing a lot of other shows in other places as well.
Brilliant. And hopefully anytime now we'll be joined by John Gebertatios, who is Huge's Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and also one of the co-founders of Blackout Improv. So hopefully we'll see him shortly. So I've got a series of sort of prompts and questions to put to our panel. But I hope you all will just sort of run and riff on those. Please don't feel limited by the questions. But I guess the place to start is, where do you start with making a show? What does that look like? Does it start with people? Does it start with a concept? For each of you, what's your approach to that? Rita, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I have produced shows that have come from both. Two of my sort of bigger projects most recently, The Mess, started with people. We wanted to do a very large, we knew we wanted it to be a big group, and we knew it wanted to be like these people that we've never gotten to work together in this particular combination. So the show developed after that. And then the other one that I most recently kind of saw from the ground up was the show Attenborough, which is an improvised nature documentary. And that definitely just started from just like the babyest shred of an idea, like, could something like that be possible? And then it was reaching out who would be the most applicable, like in this kind of work, what could that show look like? And the show was truly developed from there. So that from concept, and I've also seen it from groups, I think both.
Fantastic.
Both in my experience.
Heather, how about you? I know your production background is more in variety and comedy than in improv per se, but where does the show start for you?
It's similar to what Rita said, both from a group or an idea. Oftentimes it's also an organization maybe will approach me because they have an evening they want to fill or they want to try something. And then that is, just like Rita said, who are the right folks to work with? Who am I excited? What things do I want to try? So I think it can come from limitless places, the starting point. Yeah. And then I think it just jumps into that, what would that be? What is the next point?
Beautiful. Emily, thoughts on
that? Primarily the shows that I've been a part of producing is with Jorts, so it's me, Ryan Vaness, and Phil Peterson. Our two biggest productions, one is Prom Night, which has been at Huge a few times, and that actually happened by accident. The way that we didn't intend it for it to be a show at all. We had actually reached out. We were looking for a chance to do a one-night sort of silly jam where a couple of groups would come and get dressed up in prom gear and have fun. And then we sent out the invites, and like way more people were interested. And Tim's Basement, who was an original member of Jorts, was too small, so we had to cancel that event. And Butch Roy was nice enough to offer, he was like, do you guys want to do a run? And we were like, sure. we don't know how we'll do it yet, but so we really, given the opportunity, then built the show around the Herald, which we had all taken a class doing. And so having the background in the different classes as a group was helpful to feel like we sort of built it based on the knowledge that we had. So that was an idea built out of saying yes before we were ready, which I recommend. It really gets you firing on all cylinders. And then A Snowy Kiss, which we did at Strike. It was an improvised Hallmark Christmas movie. And Ryan, again, from Jorts, had the idea. We sat down, we were like, we love that. We watched a bunch of movies, tried to map it out, asked some friends we were looking forward to playing with, and went from there.
Beautiful. And Joe, your thoughts and experiences?
With the Bearded Company, we were originally just doing, like back in 2006 when we started, it was just doing some jams and things where we just invited people to come play. And yeah, it kind of came out of people at that point. And throughout the years, with both the Bearded Company and other productions that I've produced or helped produce, it has largely been around groups of people that either have an idea that they want to try to figure out how to make work. And so I've been able to lend my hand in that creation process. I think a lot of times it really just depends on, who's involved and how they want to be involved. And it's kind of just going from utilizing the tools that are offered in front of you, whether that's people or concepts or whatever, and kind of just jumping into it. And kind of like Emily said, it's taking a situation and just going forward before you have too much time to think about it, because if you think about it too hard, you'll never end up doing it.
Nice. Opening it up to sort of any of you here, when it comes to conceptually driven shows where there's an idea and then it becomes a thing, how do you go about the decision-making process of how that comes together? Obviously, like you said, there's a certain element of, leap before you look. But how do you figure out, you take an Attenborough, how do you figure out how that should be structured based on the idea that you're playing with?
I can speak to Attenborough again, just in that was a really funny thing because we cast the show, and I think communication is like one of your best friends up front, is being very clear if you're reaching out to people of like in an improv setting again. And I assume that same other could speak to this too, when you're sort of maybe creating a written show together, something more, but to just be like, we were very upfront, like, we don't know what this show is yet. Like, we're excited about the possibility of making this real. And we probably rehearsed, I would say, maybe Emily was in this cast, Heather too, like maybe six weeks almost into that first run before, as director, I was like, you know what, let's go a totally different direction. Okay. And that was just like really due to something I love so much about improv, just to the collaborative nature of just like getting it in a room and putting it on its feet and finding a lot of things that didn't work first. Great. And like really pushing through those and finding the next idea, as opposed to letting it be like, oh, this can never happen. So it really turned out to be a show very different from what Molly Ritchie and Aaron Shepard and I sort of first talked about in its seedling ideas. And that really came from the just like showing up every week and working what we thought was going to work and seeing it not work, and then finding the thing that did work, which was really cool. And that just, again, I'm so thankful for the commitment of the improvisers who just pushed through. But I also think like it was helpful that up front we were like, hey, we got to work through a lot of stuff before we're going to figure this show out. So people knew that up front, and I think approached the process differently, at least from a director's point of view. It sure seemed that way, having worked with some of those improvisers.
So it seems like there were some good expectations set of like, hey, we don't quite know what this is yet.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Emily, Joe, Heather, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can speak to, Rita covered a really great aspect about coming in and using your performers as like true collaborators to build a show together. I think all those steps were exactly what we did for A Snowy Kiss, for example. And again, yeah, with the expectation up front being like, we have this general idea, here's our research, but we want everyone to feel like they're going to own this show at the end. For prom night, it was a little different. So with a more structured show, George says the four of us, original members, we built the form and really collaborated, just the four of us, to do the form for the first time around. So we built our processes. It was weekly rehearsals. Some of the pre-planning is just even sitting down for 2 hours where you're not rehearsing, but you're just looking at what the next 8 weeks is going to look like, and checking in midway to feel like, how are we doing? What do we need to get done before? And being really honest and open about identifying anything that needs tweaking. But then when we reached out for our second run to bring other people on, we let them know up front, like, we have 8 weeks of programming. Essentially, we're onboarding them onto the show and being ready each week with a rehearsal agenda, and like specific points to help our friends and how we've done the show before. And also, again, I'd say being open to the ideas that your additional players have, because the show continues to grow, and it's the strength to bring other people on to hear some different opinions and tweak something that you thought was working that started to work even better.
Sure. That's an interesting balance of sort of the readiness and the preparedness, but also the openness to what isn't going to work. And I think, yeah, it seems to me like that, being ready and prepared with the research and the plan, but being ready to abandon it puts you in a really strong position. Yeah. Nice. Joe or Heather?
Sometimes you just kill your darlings. You have to acknowledge, like, you know what, we put a lot of work into this one thing, and you have to be able to walk away from it and know that that's all right. You can use it later.
I thought it was going to be so funny to have the animals talk. It wasn't. Anyway. It wasn't.
I'll just jump on as well. Emily brings up a great point. Like, when you are in a original creation group, that's such an incredible experience in one particular way, where you're collaborating, much like in Attenborough, and it sounds like with Snowy Kiss, working together. And then to onboard new individuals is a special moment as well, because it's really easy for those new individuals to not feel welcome, and it's not on purpose. They just don't know, and they weren't there when it was born. So if everyone's telling stories about, remember the first time, remember this, that's not a welcoming space. And it's also, just like Emily said, reminding yourself that you may have done the show 3 or 4 runs, 5 or 6 years. People bring such new insights all the time. And it also helps your brain have to, like, oh yeah, it does work the first way. It's not a bad way. And it can work another way. So just having that mindset as a producer or whoever's in charge of whatever project, that when you bring people in, you're bringing them in because they are incredible and unique, and they do have great insights, not just to plug them into a system, unless you want to. And if you want to, that's also fine. Communication is great.
Yeah, that communication and expectations seem pretty key there. Joe, can I ask about the Beard's experience with creating a format like Swords and Sorcery, where there is such a specific device involved there? What was the conception process like for something like that?
With that show in particular, with pretty much all of our themed shows, we do, as a core group, we do kind of an intense amount of research to figure out, to better understand the genre or the type of show we are trying to create. So there's a lot of background research before we even begin doing anything. And it's a lot of discussion to figure out if we feel like certain things make sense in terms of being accessible to the audience we're trying to reach, and trying to understand what audience we're even trying to reach at all. But with Swords and Sorcery in particular, honestly, I had never played Dungeons and Dragons in my entire life before that show. I had nothing against it. I just didn't care about it. And so my co-founder, Matthew, he was really excited about it. So he brought it to the group and just thought it would be an interesting, fun idea, another route for our group. Our group has, thankfully, we have a group of very outspoken people. So when they have ideas, they have no problem sharing them. But with that show, it was kind of like Rita was talking about, and Emily and Heather. It's a lot of experimentation. It's trying to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. And then, we did, we did like two whole runs of that show before we figured out what actually was working. And we had to take away a lot of things because it felt like it took away from our experience and the audience's experience. So it is a lot of constantly having to stop after each show, look at it. We never stop rehearsing a show, even during our runs. Like, that's something that I don't think that's something every group has to do, but for us, we continually still meet every Wednesday to make sure that we are still tweaking things because there's always something you see that is working or not working, and you need to adjust it. So with that, it's a lot of process, and it's a lot of, kind of like everyone else was saying, is a lot of communication, just making sure that we are hearing everyone's opinion, because I'm not going to see everything. So I count on everyone else having eyes and ears to tell me, like, wow, that sucked, or that didn't work, or this complete accident in the show worked really well. Let's do that more.
Lovely. What I'm hearing from all of you is it sounds like with all of your processes, there's a pretty high degree of collaboration in developing whatever you're doing. I wonder if you could speak to that. I'm sure challenges must arise from time to time where there are simply incompatible visions of where something is going. What experiences have you had with that? What has worked for you? What has not worked for you in managing those artistic challenges or conflicts?
I guess I'll just jump in. From experience, I've learned setting really clear expectations at the beginning of a process, even if it's a show that you do every year. For example, I have a Women's History Month show I do every March. The team, we rewrite it every year. So it's a new show, same folks, a lot of new folks too. But every time we have to set expectations. Otherwise, people just don't know. I'm a big fan of giving people the tools to succeed. And if that tool is a rehearsal schedule and an expectation that they'll be at 80% of rehearsals, saying that, because some people, if people don't know they're expected to be at all the rehearsals, then it's an awkward thing when there's a conflict over expectations. So that's something that has worked from years of doing things wrong.
Agreed. Other thoughts, Emily or Joe?
Yeah. I'd say, I think setting expectations is a huge thing. In the shows where we have either brought in guests or we have produced shows, I think also going into it, understanding that sometimes no matter how hard you try to set it up correctly, some things just kind of blow up, and that's okay. That's a part of it. And not everything is going to be as successful as it is in your head when you're laying it all out. I have had many times where I was like, oh, this seems like I've got this process down. I know exactly how I'm going to make this all work. And then I do it and I'm unhappy, or other people are unhappy, or we're all unhappy. It's just, that is part of it. Like that, the unfortunate thing is, like, that's a part of being in the arts, is sometimes it's just not going to go great, and that's fine.
Sure. Fantastic. Yeah, I think accepting that and not, I know I've been in that place of like, everything has to go right and everything has to be perfect. And that, that can really set up a lot of pain.
Well, and like sometimes you're just gonna have a bad night too. I mean, if you're doing 6 to 8 weeks of rehearsal, sometimes it just doesn't click that night, and it might not really be anyone's fault, except everyone had a really shitty day. And even just if you're leading that rehearsal, which I suggest if you're ever running your own production, like Ryan, Phil, and I will decide who's going to take the lead on each rehearsal. So we aren't stepping on each other's toes, but to have the wherewithal too, that if it's been an hour and a half and everybody's having the worst time of their lives, maybe you just cut it and you say, you know what, we'll regroup next week. And then it's like also making yourself available for anyone. For all of our shows, we have a separate Slack channel, and all the so it's just a place where we can go and where people can be readily accessible for conversations that might happen after a rehearsal or like throughout for expectation setting. And I think the other thing about expectation setting is like just for each other, not even for the people that you might be bringing in, but like as producers, if there's multiple, just knowing what to expect from each other and like just deciding who's going to be, if someone's going to be in charge for one rehearsal, like really letting them take that. And it helps. The last thing you want to do is see like your directors fighting with each other during a rehearsal. So to have that sort of the wherewithal. And, you know, if there is some sort of disagreement, when there are 4 Jorts members, sometimes we just vote, and whatever idea came out with 3-1, or if it was 2-2, we'd have more discussions. But really, if you're a team, sometimes you just go straight up Survivor style and cast your votes, and whatever idea is in the majority, you go with that one.
Sure. Lovely. I think we have Rita back. She's been experiencing some rough connection issues here. Rita, if you are with us, what we're currently discussing is how it gets handled in rehearsal when there's a collaborative process and there may be artistic disagreements or artistic difficulties. What are the management techniques that have worked for you and not in those cases?
Wow. Yeah. I think I feel bad 'cause I missed everything that was said. I know just like an openness and just willingness to be wrong, which I spoke to earlier. I think that's hard when we're heading up a show because you feel so responsible and you feel like you must know more. And so that has helped me in the past if it's really like, oh, it's just to let go.
Oh, did we lose her again?
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh, I think we lost Rita. All right.
I mean, I think kind of, I'm not going to speak for Rita,
Sure,
but
sure.
I know she and I have talked about this at different points over the years. And I do think like there is, I think the biggest thing that can always help you is just being honest with the people you are working with and trying to be as honest as you can for what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. And even if that honesty brings up kind of bad feelings sometimes, that's part of that process, because you are not going to fix something without actually expressing what the issue is.
Sure.
It will only get worse over time if you do not discuss something. So
it seems to me like there's maybe a basis of trust that needs to be there amongst collaborators to be able to accept those criticisms and those disagreements without feeling like, oh God, everyone's going to hate me, or,
absolutely.
you know, I can't say this because I'll just seem angry and we'll all, you know, yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Rita, it looks like we have you back. We lost you there. Any further thoughts you want to share?
The one thing that I wanted to get out, and maybe this has all been said, so I really apologize, but that I think has really been valuable for me as a director and a producer is right up front having a communication process in place that you've communicated to your group. Like, if there's a problem, here's how I want to approach it. Here's how I want you to communicate with me. These may come up, like I want them to come up. Please talk to me if you're not feeling artistically satisfied or whatever it may be, so that artists don't hold back and they really feel like they are a part of it, sort of to what Heather was saying before, like bringing those people in as a valuable part of your show. I think what is so sad that we've come across, especially now in my role at Huge, is when we hear about like a dissatisfied performer, but we hear about it at the end of a 10-week run, which followed a 10-week rehearsal process. So that's 20 weeks of that person being unhappy, and they never spoke up until it was all over. And nothing can be done about it. So I think that, and again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating what other folks have said, but that communication is so key to me, that you've set that process in place, like, especially when you're entering a show that is truly like, you maybe don't know what it is from the start. So there could really be some like butting heads of ideas and crashing, like, for whatever that dynamics there. So that from the top, here's how I want to talk about it. I want to make sure you come to me about it, and we'll hopefully work through it that way. So I was trying to say that before the internet.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have one question from somebody on the Zoom here. Since we're sort of at the production level right now, what is or are the biggest challenges you face as a producer? So I'd be curious from your experiences, what are the toughest aspects of that part of the job?
I mean, I have one right off the bat,
Yeah.
and it's scheduling. Even most of my stuff is like more scripted or involves a lot of components. So sometimes it needs just a different rehearsal schedule. But even with the improv projects that I'm involved in, everyone's so busy in our lives. So it's just scheduling how much rehearsal the team can do or how much the project needs. And sometimes the team is available for less than maybe what the project needs. So that is a challenge. I'm not someone who wants to be like, well, then let me get a new team. However, it does then, like everyone was just saying, it has to have a communication then. What is the needs of the project? So scheduling is my biggest challenge.
Great. Thoughts from others?
I think one that is hard to get away from is trying to figure out how to actually get butts and seats to see the show. That is, I mean, that's something that I am regularly thinking about with any show that I'm producing or a part of. And it's a real challenge for everyone, I think, especially as there are so many options for people. It's trying to figure out how you can put yourself in a position to get people there. And what the right way to do that is, my God. I mean, I've probably tried everything at this point. And sometimes that is exhausting. And I think it's trying to be like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm ever prepared for the exhaustion that comes with trying to get a show in front of people.
Sure. Can you speak at all to some of the things that you have done or tried that have perhaps been more successful in getting butts and seats?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think everyone does social media, and I think that's, I think that is a strong part of putting a show out there. But I think you do have to find as many ways to get in front of the people you think will actually come to your show, or try to get in front of people that possibly don't know who you are. That has been a big part of, as far as the Bearded Company is concerned, that's been a big part of our strategy. We have always tried to find a way to get in front of people that we don't know. So for a long time, we used to do, when we first were starting at Huge, just to build our audience, I mean, we were literally walking around Uptown with like sandwich board signs on ourselves with tiny, crappy printed flyers and just talking to random people on the sidewalk saying like, hey, we have a show in like 3 hours. We really want to see you there. Or giving away free tickets, or trying to get on as many online calendars as we can, send out regular press releases. Even if you don't think you're great at writing press releases, give it a shot anyway. Because you are going to be surprised. Sometimes it's like either slow news or your thing is just weird enough or different enough that they're like, yep, I want to at least find out more about this. So you never know. I think it's literally trying almost anything. I have bugged as many people as I can. We have tried to do partnerships with breweries and coffee shops, anyone we can. So try those things. It is worthwhile to try to reach outside of the improv community. I can guarantee that.
Brilliant.
And to piggyback off of Joe's trying to get in front of people that might not necessarily think like, oh, the thing I want to do on Friday is go see an improv show, is we've found success in whatever show we've put together, having a succinct description for what it is that resonates and explains it all in the quickest bite. Like, what is George Presents Prom Night? It's an improvised prom night based on an audience story. What is A Snowy Kiss? It's an improvised can't say Hallmark because copyright, but holiday romance movie. And so just to be able to have that elevator pitch, it's almost like a job. Like just being able to pitch it in a way that's short, that like my parents can go to their friends and say that they have the conceptualize of what it is. Because if it's a short ask, it's a lot easier, I think, to get people's attention, and then they feel secure knowing what they're getting into off the bat. It's trying to make it as easy sell as possible.
Yeah. I think Huge does a good job with this. I'm pretty sure that like when producers are putting up a new show at Huge, they ask you for that, and I think that is a very good ask of having. What I've over the years have always sent to Butch or Rita or whoever has been in charge of those things is I give them a short description, which is like 1 sentence usually, or the long description of the show, which is like 5 sentences, and then any other things I think of that might be useful. But yeah, I agree with Emily totally. Having your like 1-line elevator pitch of what your show is, if you don't know how to explain your show, it's probably a bad sign.
I think this may be true artistically as well, that it's really helpful to be able to drill down to, the central, what is this actually about? I would love to dig even a little more into the press release thing, because I think that's maybe something that may not occur to a lot of people producing shows, especially for the first time. How do you go about that? How do you figure out who to contact, and how does that world work?
Well, I guess I'll speak too.
Okay.
You all both know, everyone else knows as well. I wish it was easy. I am someone who, like, you can write a general press release, which is great, like succinctly talk about your show and send that to WCCO and all those places. I get a lot of foot traffic, that's not the word, legroom in small, specific publications. Like, if you're going to reach out to the women's press, why? Yes, Women's History Month show makes perfect sense. But when I did a show about R.T. Rybeck, the mayor, why does the women's press want to do an article about that? Oh, and then I have to think about my show. Oh, well, I identify as a woman. So does half the cast. Like, you have to pitch it to them to make it easy for them to be like, this makes sense. Those general press releases are great too. Like, definitely start there. But also think about if you're reaching to a specific audience, which is great because that specific audience of the women's press, for example, is women who want to come to see women locally create shit. Oops, excuse me.
It's okay. No, this is...
But so it's kind of thinking about your audience and talking to them in why they're interested. So put that in your press release. If you're working in Minnesota, and I'm going to assume maybe most of our audience is, Minnesota loves Minnesota. So talk about all the wonderful Minnesota things in your show, meaning people from St. Paul, a group of Highland Park neighborhood improvisers, or is it everyone who's in the suburb? That's a unique draw of, oh, these are all people that don't live in the city and yet they do an improv show. That might not make headline news, but it's something different.
Awesome.
That's my point of view.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I have one, and I may go away. I'm sorry. Not like maybe specifically a press release, but I think, again, like everybody has said, move beyond just posting on social media and just asking your friends to come, but also utilizing who your friends might be connected to and not being afraid of that, because you have to do the work to get your show out there. So I can't tell you the number of people the mess badgered to try to get us on Art Hounds. Because that is putting us in front of an audience that is not our audience, which was so apparent when they all came to strike to see the Mess Manor and nobody knew what they were in for. Like, we did the Art Hounds, that show sold out almost immediately after that Art Hounds broadcast. Like, within that 24-hour period, those ticket sales just went way up. So people were like, oh, I am interested in this, and this person on public radio told me about it, so it must be great. And then we had an audience filled with people who clearly had no idea what they were in for. And I would say a majority of them had a great time. Some of them were like, this is not public radio worthy. But getting outside of that, like, oh, only these people want to see improv shows, or these are the only people we talk to, and not like really getting creative with your outreach with which other panelists have spoken to. And like, again, using your connections to get to other places, not just those connections to be the ones to come see your show.
Mm-hmm. So. And we for our Snowy Kiss, which was the most recent one, it was at Strike, and we utilized our network of like what has worked for other artists. I mean, for Ryan, Phil, and I, we have a very limited. We have the things that have worked for us, but like we by no means know how to sell the show out. And so really reaching out to other artists, it's a fine line between like, you don't want to get too far into like, I'm going to copy everything that you're doing, but like, what vehicles have you found success using? And then just taking that information and making it your own, so that you're still like honoring their stuff and paving your own way. But for example, one of our colleagues told us about Minnesota Playlist, and I had never posted there once. And it is a wonderful spot where you can really, like Heather said, think about what makes your show unique. For Snowy Kiss, it was limited run. It was you could like check limited run, improvised creation, or like just specific things like this is a new work. And it's 6 days long. And we had 30 people bought tickets from like a local high school for one night, because for some reason it made it to this random high school of, we think, theater kids, just to come and see this holiday themed show. So really utilizing your colleagues, but in a way that you're still making it your own is definitely something to keep in mind as well.
Any further thoughts on that from anybody on our panel? Lovely. For anyone who is just joining us or has joined us since we started, if you do have any questions that come up, we absolutely want to try to answer those. Feel free to ask questions in the text chat box, and as the opportunity arises, we'll bring those into the conversation here. And thank you so much for being here. So the next thing I want to move on to a little bit is casting. Obviously, a number of the shows you've mentioned, you sort of had a pre-built cast, a group of people that came together in one way or another. When that isn't the case, when you need to find people to bring into your project, could you tell me a little bit about your processes for that? What does that look like for you? Let's start with Rita.
Yeah, so I think first kind of deciding what type of audition you want to have. Do you want it to just be totally open? Are you limiting the audition? Like, have you some people casting, you want to fill out the rest of the roles? And then again, securing where that can happen, and getting getting your time, like tables, like all the legwork of make a Google Doc, get your time. How much time do you have? How long can you see people? What number of groups of people can you come in? So bringing in all those logistics. And again, a lot of, I know I'm so keep broken record on this communication thing, but just being very open about what you're looking for. And one thing that I think is very valuable is commitment upfront. I think that, especially in an improv setting, can be a real downfall for a lot of producers, is holding their cast accountable. And that can be really hard, because lots of times we're casting our friends. We are a small community. We feel big, but we're actually very small. And I think that can be really hard to have to tell your friend of like, well, no, it said here in this audition, you need to be available for 6 of 8 rehearsals. You're only available for 4. I'm sorry, I can't cast you. So holding your friends accountable, and then, or your cast, your friends, the people accountable, and holding yourself accountable, and really like holding that line, which can be really hard to do. Obviously life happens, but to start from that point that you have an expectation and being clear about those. And I think all of that stuff up front in an audition notice is super valuable. And then talking with either your group, if you're creating a show together, what you're really looking for in a performer. Do you want it to be only experienced performers? Do you want a mix of experience and new performers? And just making sure you're heading into that audition process already knowing those things. Of course, being willing to be surprised by some of the things you find and maybe pivot, but like have a real clear sort of plan for those auditions as you head in. I think has been valuable for me as someone who's ran a handful.
Fantastic. The rest of our panel, any thoughts on that?
I echo all that Rita says as well. Going with a clear idea, Also, like knowing what you expect from the performers. If it's an audition where, and like Rita said, put that in the notice. This is a group improv audition. This is one-on-one whatever auditions. We expect a resume. You don't have to do any of those things, but if you want those things, you have to put that in the notice. Again, this is just from my like mission statement of like, give people the tools to succeed. Tell them what you need. Also, posting, this is where social media is like great, much like with marketing. Put the notice on Facebook or on all your social media channels, because who knows who will get to see it that may not have known that that's even a thing they could audition for, because they're not in the group, or they're new, or they're just moved here. I think that's a cool way to invite new people in. The resource Minnesota playlist that Emily suggested is excellent for that. Like 2,000 actors a day in Minnesota look at that. So if you're gonna get eyeballs on new performers, that's a great way to do that. That's just like a concrete resource.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I would jump on that, and I think specifically for just to add a very small thing. Yeah, I agree with Heather that and Rita, like trying to get outside of your own circle as much as possible is hugely helpful. And I know for specifically for my late night show, when we were looking for new writers and performers for that, we did do a lot of outreach specifically to people we wanted to submit. So I think if there are people that you are super interested in, or if there's a community that you're trying to reach, if you have a resource with that, like we were very lucky that, and he's not here right now, but John was a big part of our show, and John was a huge resource for us to be able to reach people that were outside of our very kind of bland white group. And so he was hugely helpful in us being able to have touch points with communities outside of ourselves. And I think if you can try to find those resources, that will only be a boon to you, because yeah, you will end up being, you'll be lucky and be able to be surprised by stuff that is so beyond what you ever thought you would see.
Lovely.
To prevent being repetitive, because I agree with everything that all my other co-presenters have said, but just one word of advice as well is, if you're going to reach out and make any sort of specific ask or a specific inquiry, like just make sure that you and whoever you're co-producing your show with are on the same page about following through with it. Nothing is worse, I think, than sending out a message being like, hey, we're interested in potentially having you part of the show, and then them receiving radio silence. Or again, with that expectation setting, you know, you're trying to brand your show, you're trying to be a representative of the improv community, and you're trying to create a community for whatever project you're doing. And so to be thoughtful in the asks, to type out and have somebody review an email before you send it out, even just to make sure that you're putting your best and most organized foot forward, because it indicates to the people that you're sending this to that like, you have your shit together and that they have confidence in you to come on board. Or if you're not even asking them to come on board, asking them to consider and to start the conversation, which then goes back to that open honesty of like, you know, we're not sure if we can guarantee you this slot, but we want to know if you're interested if we pursue this option or something like that. But just to be really thoughtful in that process, to prevent any broken hearts. We're artists, we want to get involved with stuff, and to just set yourself up for success.
Nice. We had a question from Jenny Young about diversity casting in particular. I know, Joe, you had mentioned how beneficial it was to have John working on late nights. Any thoughts from you all on how to encourage diversity and inclusion in your casting and in your outreach when it comes to casting?
Yeah, I was actually going to pop in on that before you asked the question. I think in what panelists have been saying in terms of reaching outside the community, which in Minnesota, we know our community gets very, very white, to get outside of that and diversify it. I think being very open and available to make the audition process safe for communities that haven't felt previously welcome. So I know one question we've started adding to our audition notices at Huge that I've seen a lot of groups sort of work in now, and I think it's so valuable, is just adding that question box of like, is there anything we should know that would make you feel more safe or comfortable in your audition? And that is just an open place where people can list maybe performers they're not comfortable being in a room with to protect those, but also like we've had a lot of performers of color be able to say things like, I don't want to be the only performer of color in the room in this audition group. And then we know that going in and we do the work to make sure that that performer feels safe and feels welcome in the space and has what they need, the tools they need to be successful. And I think that is on the producer to be doing all that legwork, to be doing that outreach, to be having that communication so that you demonstrate that trust and reliability to those performers who haven't felt welcomed in the past, that they can take this step and enter into this world, and that we want to do everything we can to make that a space where they feel ready to share what they have to offer. So yeah, obviously in Minnesota, John Gabertatios has been an incredible resource in helping like build that connection and trust in communities that we haven't been in before. But I know I've done things, and I've even held a whole separate day of auditions that is only for POC, so that they don't have to have, other than my white face, but they don't have to have anyone else in the room, that they can just like have what they need to feel the most successful. So being really creative and open, thinking that way, and doing the extra work on you to have those communities feel like this is truly accessible for them and that they'll be supported. So I think those are great things to consider upfront when you're running an audition process.
And I would just add as well that if you're thinking about a show and you are considering adding additional members of the community to join you, to just start going and seeing what's out there and seeing the shows and seeing getting outside of your own comfort zone for the improv or the performances that you might have been accustomed to, because there's a lot of people making some really great stuff out there, and to see it not only once but twice, and see like if there's performers that catch your eye, that if they were a name on a Google Doc, you might have just looked right past it, but that and from the show you took a chance on, like, oh, I would love to work with that person. And so that you're doing the work again as a producer to get familiar with your pool and to get out of we all have our preferences and we have the shows that we go and see and the grooves that we get into, but to shake it out for yourself and to see all the work that's out there that you might not have already seen.
Fantastic. I know Huge, in addition to all that, even has showcases at the end of their classes. Maybe not a terrible idea if you're looking to diversify your casting, create a larger pool for yourself, to go and watch those showcases, which are free and available to the public, especially when you get people that are 301, 401 level, to see what's coming, because there is to an extent a supply and demand problem, and getting out in front of it can be a big help. Any other thoughts from Heather or Joe on that?
Just echoing what everyone has said. Yeah, going to see stuff. And even if you're casting an improv show, go to a play, because there's a lot of incredible actors that have improv experience that maybe have just been working in scripted theater that you might want to invite to your audition or get excited about, because maybe they've forgotten how much they love improv. And that's a cool way to broaden the pool with people that are out there doing all sorts of incredible stuff.
Yeah, I can echo that too. I know for last year when we auditioned for our Epic Adventures show, we specifically, kind of to Heather's point, we reached out to the acting community, scripted acting community, to see if there was anyone that was available there that would want to give it a shot, because why not? It's never going to hurt you to see a few more people. So branch out that way. I think when it comes to diversity in general, I think to Rita's point, I can only say, put that effort on yourself rather than making it like their effort. You are the producer. Feel free to push yourself to make a little extra effort. And if you need help getting introductions, that's fine. But once you have that introduction, do the extra legwork and try to encourage them and make them know that you are actively trying to be a part of this process, and you want them to be a part of this process as well. You appreciate their viewpoint.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think I would just emphasize to Rita's point. I think there's a real earned deficit of trust between minority performers, performers of color, and the white performing world. And so I think we need to recognize that it's, if we want that trust, it's ours to earn, not theirs to hand over to us. So I love that. Thank you. Where do I want to go from here? Oh, on the subject of casting. It seems like some shows that we all work on, the folks that are creating them are also performing in them, and others, the creator may be the outside director. And I'm interested to hear your experiences about the advantages and disadvantages of those two ways of working. What makes one or the other harder or easier? Heather, let's start with you if you have any thoughts.
Are you speaking as if you're also the producer, or just in general, just to clarify?
If you are the producer and or director and also performing in the show.
Also in it.
Yeah.
Yes, then that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it just, you're juggling a lot of balls at that point. And I think I wouldn't dissuade it, because I also like to do that. It's just being mindful when you're performing, when you're directing / producing it. If you are the authority figure and also on the team, you need to do your own mental awareness of when are you in charge and when are you performing, and making sure that everyone in the room is also comfortable with the fact that you are doing both things. If you're just the outside authority and in the group, I think sometimes I do feel a little like left out socially if I'm the authority figure and not in the cast. However, that is what the director and producer has signed up for.
Sure.
If you're in the cast, you do get a little more social folding. However, then there's also the moments of like, no, I'm telling you as the director, you have to do this. I don't know if this is any insight other than it's just like, you have to be clear when you're communicating as a fellow cast member, or as, no, I need you to be here on time.
Pull and rank. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Cool. Thoughts from other folks?
I mean, I can speak from, I'll speak at least just, I mean, I've been in both situations, but I'll speak more to just the kind of group self-directed route. Over the years, the Bearded Company has kind of done a little bit of everything. We've had outside directors, we've had individuals from the group, but in the last 5 years, it's been largely just self-directed, all of us. I think when it comes to that, you can get a lot of huge value out of everyone collaborating that way. However, I think the biggest thing, and it comes back to what Rita was talking about earlier, the biggest thing ends up being that you understand how to communicate with each other, that you have set yourself up for a shared language that allows you to be able to critique the work that you are all doing, and that you are not trying to individually attack somebody. You are doing this for the good of the show that you are all creating together, that you are all equal parts, and that you are hearing each other. I think a actual group language that way is hugely helpful. It has helped us as a group I mean, we still have disagreements, but it has never come to the point where it is like tearing our group apart. Even with, in this past year, adding Maria to our main company, we folded her in, and we made sure that as she was folding in, that we started to create, even just evolve our language together as a group, to make sure that she felt comfortable with how we were communicating, and that she was being heard, and that we were also being heard, and that we are creating kind of a new group language with her involved as well. So I think it is a lot about making sure you are very upfront and honest and creating a language together.
Nice.
I'll just chime in. I think in a again, having been in both directing from the outside and directing from within in a self-directed group, like the value of an occasional outside eye, like just bring a coach in, even if you've been doing it for a really long time, just invest in that and be vulnerable with that, to have someone else. Just, it doesn't have to be every time. It's fine if you even like have them and then assess like, was that valuable, was it not? But just like to just say, yeah, we need someone else to come look, I think is really valuable to just check in, especially if you've been performing together for a long time. And to what Joe was saying is just the value of doing notes and feedback like every time, even if it's a show you've done a million times with the same people, like just setting up that process that you know is there, so that it never becomes a shock when suddenly someone one time is like, hey, I hated this part in this show because I felt like this, and you've never really like set up that sort of feedback process for yourselves. Because I feel like that's easier when there's a director, like, you know, you're reporting to someone, they're going to give you notes, like that's how it goes. I think it's much harder to set up what that process looks like when you're all in it together. So just having that from the jump and then sticking to it, even when it feels tedious, because you're like, man, we've been at that 6 years. Do we really have to do notes after every show? And it's like, yeah.
And truly, like Rita was saying, like having an outside person come in every once in a while will only benefit you in being able to learn how to give each other feedback in a different way or in a new way, that all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, I didn't even realize I could say it like that or do this like that. Like, it blows your mind.
Nice. Any thoughts on how to find the right coach for your show's needs? What do you look for in finding the right person to help you in that way?
I've honestly just reached out to my contemporaries. If it's like, you know, hey, we're doing this narrative-based show. Who do you know that, or who do you hear that is like around and willing to come in and help? So again, utilizing your resources. I think that a lot of people at Huge are happy to brainstorm. If you're sort of stuck trying to figure out what exactly the best course of action is. So that's kind of how we've done in the past. If we've ever needed to bring someone outside, is you know, who do we think is willing to come in, and we need to brainstorm that. I've always had success getting a couple recommendations, and sometimes that recommendation also helps if they need to introduce us, because we might not know them personally.
Great. Any other thoughts on that?
Just don't be afraid to reach out to anyone. I mean, I know it's like a sad, like old saying of like the worst they can say is no, but that is truly what it is. Like for us, like I'm not, God, I don't want to make this a thing, but when we've been at festivals, when we've been traveling at festivals, sometimes we know who's going to be there. So we will reach out to them and say, we're going to be at this festival at the same time. Do you have like 2 hours? We will pay you just to do like a personal workshop with just us. Are you into that? Not. And a lot of times they're like, no, I have way too many things going on. I don't want to do that. But every once in a while, we've been able to study with some really fantastic people, because we've purely just been like, yep, we're all going to pitch in a little bit of money and we're going to like reach out to this person. And we've had some great experiences that way.
Wonderful. We had a question, stepping back to diversity for a moment, from Matt Axelson. When we speak of diversity, what considerations would you say are beneficial to broaden, and to consider beyond including POC? I guess asking about diversity beyond just people of color, and yeah, what bears keeping in mind there?
I definitely think age, gender identity. I also, and this is me personally, it's experience, and also have they been performing recently? Have they coming back after a long time? I love to provide on-ramps for people who've maybe taken a break or used to do it in high school or did it in college, and now they're in a different spot in their life, but they're like a brilliant artist and they just don't do it because of other constraints of their life. That I don't necessarily consider in the pool of diversity casting, where like age and POC would fall under. I like to think about diversity casting of what is a new group that would be exciting, where some individuals in the group, they all don't know each other. That's not quite in the world of diversity casting, I guess is what I'm saying. It's just other things I think about when I'm putting together a team is what is all the new interesting perspectives that can be brought together.
Wonderful. A couple other categories that certainly seem worth bearing in mind as we're making casting decisions and recruiting people are obviously disability, and where does a particular show interact with disability and what is possible within the show. And then obviously gender and sexual identities, another big category. It may not really be an issue for your show at all. It may be possible to include people across a remarkable spectrum. So a couple thoughts there. Great. Let's talk a little bit about venues. Obviously, Huge is kind of the the gorilla in the room when it comes to improv venue in Minneapolis. But beyond that, how do you go about, if you're not performing at Huge, how do you go about seeking those venues, those places to put your work up? Heather, I know you've performed in a number of other places. Let's start with you.
It starts with an email or a, hey, how'd you get to do a show in this space? Also, a theater is not the only space. Coffee shops, bars, so many places are like, yeah, come do some improv on blank night here. They might not want it after the first week because maybe it doesn't bring people, but that power of asking, like Joe was talking about, you could have a regular show if you want. You just have to ask enough people, and pretty soon some wonderful brewery is like, yeah, you can come in on Thursday nights at 7 for the next 6 weeks. You just have to ask and also broaden your idea of what a theater has to look like. A lot of improv shows are wonderfully flexible, so moving some chairs, you could do it. That is how I go about it. Also, you can talk to people who have scripted shows, who are renting a scripted show for the week. They usually have it for the whole week. They usually don't have stuff Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday nights. So you could also build a partnership that way and say like, hey, I see that you're doing blank show. I do this improv show that relates in this cool way that I've just figured out. What would a partnership look like if we could be in that space in addition? And I'm sure there's some money involved, obviously, but thinking about other ways to get into spaces that maybe you can't afford right just yet.
Nice. Other thoughts on that?
I would also add just like remembering the importance of just being able to do your art and show your work. I think sometimes we have to adjust our expectations of like, oh, well, I didn't get this run here or this amount of shows here or on this night or at this time. And especially because of like a theater like Huge, which has become what it has become and has the schedule that it has. Like some people were like, well, this is Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. in the back of Salsa a la Salsa. Like, do I want that show? And I would say, if you want to perform and do a show and get better, then yeah, you want it. So to what Heather was saying of just like really sort of branching out of what you've decided it is a worthy venue, is a worthy time slot, and just where you're at. Like some performers might be at a place with a certain type of show where it's like, well, no, we know what the show is. We've done enough. We only want to kind of do it in this way, XYZ. But if it's really about getting out there, getting a show on its feet, getting yourself more, just like more hours, more time at your craft, then just do that anywhere and be open to that. I think we can get really trapped in our idea of what a show looks like. So
nice.
Yeah, I can agree with Rita on that. I think there are, and Heather, like there are so many places that you can do a show. I mean, like literally we performed in a coffee shop for years on a random, like every other Thursday for like 2 years straight because we wanted to do it. We reached out to them and we're like, we will literally build a stage and put it in your extra room and we will perform on it. And you can keep the stage for other things if you want. But even like when we moved to Minneapolis, huge, didn't have a building when we first moved here. So we were performing in random coffee shops down here. And I think to expand on Rita's idea, expand what you see as your perfect show. Like, just go do a show at all. Like, we used to perform regularly on Saturdays at Ball's Cabaret, and that's like, you get like 7 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we were doing that like every Saturday. Like, we were like Matt and I worked together at a wine bar, and we would text Leslie Ball telling her, like, we're on our way, we just got off work, we're gonna be there. Like, just go do it anywhere.
Fabulous. Just out of curiosity and for the fun of it, can I ask each of you the oddest venue you've ever done a show in?
Mine was in the back of Salsa, which I don't even know if it's a restaurant that exists anymore, but it was literally in the back corner of the restaurant. There were 2 8-round tables that sort of flanked our stage of carpeting. The music in the restaurant was on. It was truly amazing to try to do, but we did it probably for 2 months.
Nice.
Mine is similar, a bar. However, I can't remember the name. I think it was a brewery even, but they didn't let us pick the tables. So there was no space. So we were improvising around people, which is not maybe the ideal scenario for the show we were doing. I'm sure someone could make an incredible show that is the concept, but it's not your dream. It's not at all like what rehearsal felt like, but yeah, there you are. You're only acting from here up, much like on Zoom.
Perfect.
I mean, wow, there are so many. But one of the weirdest was we performed in it was like a community center kind of thing that looked out over on like a lake or something. But there was literally a silent auction happening at the time, and people were like cocktail hour, and there was music happening. Everyone was really loud. And we were on a stage where a band had already set up, and they said that we could use their microphones, but we couldn't touch anything. And we had to work around their stuff, which gave us like 2 feet of room to do anything. Like, nobody cared. I don't even know if anyone watched that show. Who knows? It was sad.
We did one at Lynn Lake Brewery on like a busy Thursday night. And if you weren't yelling, you couldn't hear yourself. So nothing like working on that stage voice when you are competing with the other like 300 people each other, trying to ignore you doing improv while you're trying to be heard with a stand-up microphone sort of in the middle to catch sound, but it doesn't really work.
Yeah,
just a wild ride.
Wonderful. We had a question regarding venues a while back. Sorry, it's taking us a while to get to this, Rich. This question came all the way from Alaska. He says, venues in our city are in very, very short supply. Do you think it's better to rent a place or piggyback with a venue, but be at the whim of their scheduling conflicts and getting bumped? So any thoughts on that? Sort of the self-control versus versus the free space?
I would try to do both.
Sure.
I know renting a venue costs money, but say you could do it once a month if you could afford to do that and be at the whim of this other group, then you might be performing more than once a month. If it's a show that could deal with that kind of whim stuff, that's what I would try to do. Or like even twice a year if you can afford it. I know renting space is not an inexpensive game, but if you could figure out a way to do a little bit of both. If it's an improv show that on a whim you could do, that could be exciting, because if they find out that you're really great on a whim, they might want to you regularly be part of, then you can be the whim that they work around.
Lovely. Any other thoughts on that? Cool. We have another question before we sort of move into rehearsal process. Do you have any examples of ideas you've had for shows and how they've evolved into other shows or different forms than what you originally anticipated?
Yes, I do.
Give us that story, Joe.
Well, I would say the thing that we did, we did Bearded Manor, which was a take on kind of a Downton Abbey style show. But it was our first like full foray into doing a serialized narrative show. So it continued from week to week. And that we kind of realized after that we love doing that. It was so freaking difficult, but that's what made it so fun for us. So we have now kind of just kept pushing on that idea more and more with our shows. So if you've seen any of our shows over the last few years, a lot of our themed shows have now become serialized just because that is super interesting to us, and it's still insanely hard. And so we're still trying to figure out how to make it work, but I love when stuff like that happens where you just fall into something that all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is amazing. I love this. I want to do more of this.
Wonderful. Thoughts from the rest of our panel?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but with Attenborough, how that evolved. Like when we first started, we knew we wanted Molly Ritchie to play David Attenborough and narrate like a documentary, but we really thought it would be amazing to like burrow into the animals' minds, and like then the improvisers would talk as the animals, like what are these worlds like not really trying to be funny, but like really inhabit these animal worlds. Because entering into that show, we're like, oh, shows like improvisers have to chat and have conversations, like they have to make these scenes with their mouth words, so of course the animals will speak, and like I said, we went a long time through the rehearsal process with that, and very funny, like it was such a beautiful cast of like really hilarious creative performers, so lots of funny things happen, but it just never felt right. And I know as the director, even though like maybe 3 weeks prior to me saying it out loud, I thought to myself, like, I don't want to hear them, not because they're not funny and amazing, but because like what a spectacular thing to just see them say everything physically. And then I really struggled of like, oh my gosh, I cast these 10 people who think they're going to be in an improv show, and then I have to tell them they can't talk, and like they'll all leave. And I just really struggled with it as a director, because I just didn't think they would say yes, or that people would find that a compelling way to perform. And when I finally opened my mouth at the end of a rehearsal and was like, hey, where's everybody at if you couldn't speak? If you just had to like really physically inhabit these creatures? And everyone was just so on board, right? Even if they were skeptical, like the first time we did it, it was magic, and everything changed. And like, it is a truly compelling show. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you watch it, it is mesmerizing, like what the performers on stage are able to do, like with their bodies. And even when I don't let them move their eyebrows, because animals don't have eyebrows, like the things that they can express, and to have Molly play along that as Attenborough and like move through these stories is just, it's so incredible to me. And I just love how opposite it is of what we thought that show would be, and how it took like a real, it isn't in retrospect, but it felt like a real big risk to suddenly say to these people, like, this is opposite of everything you usually do. Would you do it with me? And I'm just so happy everybody did. Like, it was such a left turn.
Lovely. Emily or Heather, any stories to impart? Cool. We do have another question here from Ryan. Have you ever felt boxed in by the expectations of your audience, other improvisers, the community, or whoever? Do you lean into those expectations or try to break them? Fascinating question. Feels like a stumper.
I
mean, I could.
Joe, you go. I have a thing, but you go first because I just talked.
Yes, all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think there's. I think there are a lot. Like, I think every group experiences. I think especially groups that continue to perform regularly, I think expectations absolutely get built up for you. Even if it's not like your audience is it's not like they're trying to be jerks or anything. They're just like, they expect a lot of you, and they expect you to be like winning all the time. And that is just not possible, which is, I think for us, for the Bearded Company in particular, we we work really hard to try to break their expectations, but break our own expectations of what we can do and produce. So we are constantly trying to evolve, because it's easier than trying to let the audience feel like they understand everything we do. So it's easier just to put something new out there so that we can feel like, great, this is new to us and to you. So we're all learning. But yeah, it is like those expectations come down really hard on you, I think sometimes. And I think sometimes when you feel like you've failed in a show, it can bring you down, and it can make it harder to want to come back and produce another one, or even get on stage the next week sometimes, because it's just like, great, that was great. That went nothing like we had thought, and now we have to go do it again. Great.
I completely agree. I think that the newness, and to always make sure that at the end of the day, you as a group are being excited by the stuff that you're working on in the face of, you know, the promises that you make. Like, are you going to deliver me the show, you know, format that the title said or that I heard on the radio? You want to still be able to always check the boxes, but you know, when we did our improvised Hallmark movie, we purposefully, when we reached out to some folks, we wanted a couple of performers, one in particular who's just like, you never knew what he was going to do, and that was exciting. He didn't really abide by the Hallmark structure, but he worked within it, and so our stories got a lot more interesting. And some people were like, I didn't know that a Hallmark show would have mentions of the devil in it. And we're like, you know what? We didn't either, but wasn't that a ride? Wasn't that fun? Did you have a good time? And so I think being able to deliver on your promises, but make sure that you're doing it on your terms. And at the end of the day, you're doing it for fun and for joy, because this is the thing that brings us joy. So if somebody's disappointed in the end product, that doesn't really matter if you're happy with it. And if there's something to tweak, go find an oddball or switch it up a little bit, and then there's nothing that says you can't go back to doing something that you've done before. Maybe you just needed a break.
Great. Rita, did you have a thought on that as well?
I cut out again, so sorry if I missed something. I just was going to say, really, like something like The Mess, we actually we went in with one idea and it totally changed as the group went on, but like we purposely have designed our structure in our show to make the audience feel off kilter, so that the top of our show is to mess with their expectation. Improv show is so it's been an interesting, like we've developed a structure around trying to break out of what an audience expectation is, and sometimes that really works in their favor because it knocks them off their seat a little bit, and then they're like on for a ride that they weren't prepared for. But sometimes that fails miserably. Like sometimes we've knocked them off kilter and they're like, well, this is the terrible thing that I didn't want or think was going to happen. So we perpetually lean into it, sometimes with much success and sometimes with huge failures. But knowing that people, like especially the top of our show, isn't generally what, especially someone who hasn't seen us, would expect from a show when we get started. Nice.
Heather, thoughts from you at all?
Not much to add. I feel these three covered up some secrets, covered a lot of excellent ground, and a lot of great points is audience expectation. What an incredible gift that people come to your shows enough that they expect things from you. And then like what a curse of like, am I beholden now to what they want me to do versus what I want to do? And I think these three individuals pointed out that it's about like also keeping you happy. If you've advertised the show one way, please deliver on what you've advertised. But if you've advertised something new, you get to do something new and allowing yourself to be an artist instead of beholden to maybe what other people want you to do.
Okay. Nice. All right, next topic. When it comes to rehearsals, for folks that maybe haven't led an improv rehearsal before, let me ask you, what do your rehearsals typically look like? What, beginning to end, what is sort of the process there? Emily, let's start with you.
For rehearsals, for George's shows in particular, we're pretty business time. We'll have an agenda, most likely throw it up on the old Slack channel before people get there, both as a reminder that practice is in fact happening, and we tell them where the location is and the hours. And so you're going to get that at least a few hours, if not a day beforehand. And then it'll show sort of what our anticipated exercises might be. Sometimes maybe towards the beginning of the show, it might be a little bit more structured. In the structure will be previously agreed on by the producers of Jorts. But we always like to start with that flex window of people rolling in. It's time for us to get to know each other, and to give time to do your check-ins, check on any boundaries anyone has that we should need to know about, and then hopping into the structure to give at least, an hour and 40 minutes of actual programmed time. If the first 20 minutes is expectation setting and checking in, and then just hitting it hard, sometimes having a break if folks need it, and then ending on time, if not 5 minutes early, just to make sure that we are honoring everyone's time and commitment that they signed up for.
Cool, great. Joe, how are your rehearsals typically structured?
So for just general bearded rehearsals, we still do pretty regularly. We'll try to kind of know what we want to work on that night. Whether that's, trying to figure out like, okay, we really need to work on just character development stuff tonight. So we're just going to be doing just reps of scenes and getting characters in there. Or it's, scene painting or scene building or whatever that is. We do try to regularly put that out there. But like Emily said, a lot of it is like we still, every time, I am now very, very aware that every single time we get to rehearsal, we will spend 20 minutes to a half an hour just talking. And I don't know if that's just because we miss each other so much or what, but we do that. And you know what? It used to bother me a lot, to be completely honest, but I have gotten used to it. And I do think it does help confer that confidence and group dynamic that does benefit your show very largely. And then it's just a quick boundaries thing and jump into it. I think the more you sit around, you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about how you're going to do something. But until you actually just force yourself to get up and do it, it can be a nightmare. And look at that cat. I love this. But with us, again, like if you're self-directing, sometimes just somebody needs to say, okay, it's time to get up. We need to stop talking. Sure. And we have given ourselves all permission to basically tell each other to shut up and get up on our feet. So I think some of that, like sometimes that's all it is. If we don't have a super structured agenda, it's MJ will just be like, you know what? I really want to work on this thing. And so we just say, screw it. Yep, great. Let's go and just do it, because doing something is better than doing nothing.
Fantastic. And Heather, I know you're more in the scripted world, but I wonder what insights we can pull from your rehearsal structuring.
I also send a reminder, as much as I don't love sending reminders the day of or a few days, because it's just amazing how often people forget about rehearsal, especially if you're using a variety of different rehearsal spaces or just life. So there's a lot of reminders. And in that reminder is, please try to arrive on time. Because that check-in process is important. However, sometimes that can translate to people's brain of, well, then I can arrive at 7:15 because we're just chatting, not realizing that chatting is part of the process. That's also coming along with expectation setting. So similar, most of the projects I work on are like, very deadline driven. So we may be in a writing process or a blocking or a staging, or we're devising some weird thing for a bit. So each one has a different footprint, but it does all start with checking in, boundary discussions, what's on people's mind, and also opening it up for people if we're working on a scripted project of what are you feeling good or want some help on before you jump into the thing that they're like, please don't read these pages. I try to get people I don't want people to apologize. I want to give them the opportunity to talk about, okay, this doesn't have an ending. Let's jump in, instead of feeling like, oh no, don't look at the thing I'm making, in general.
Lovely. And Rita, thoughts on your typical processes in rehearsal?
Yeah, mine is very similar to what's already been said in terms of process, especially an internally directed group or show, very similar to what Joe and Emily said about that. Yeah, my advice, just sort of echoing the thing, is if you're directing a show and it's a group of people who are working together for the first time or even haven't worked, like if it's a show you're in charge of, is to just have a plan and an agenda, because time is so precious, and that can be just exhausting for a performer, especially with all the other things they might have going on in their life, to come like commit this 2 hours to you and then have the director like should be like, well, what should we do tonight? What do you guys think? So just the value, even if that shifts, like once the work starts, I think it says a lot to your cast that you came prepped and that you're like, this is what I would love to work on. That may change, but here's my general plan. Saying that at the top, here's what I'm hoping to accomplish in these next 2 hours, I think really goes a long way. It helps your cast feel like their time and talent is respected.
So you're saying communicate is what you're saying.
Would I say it again?
Fantastic. Got the question. Have you ever done improv with a cat? I have just now. Anyone else ever? I mean, I know Heather has an extended series.
Well, I do. I was about to do an improv show with horses and then COVID-19 canceled it.
No.
That will come back, but it doesn't have a date yet. But I had 2 horses lined up to come to Mixed Blood Theater on March 24th. Shawnee and Timber, but we had to cancel it and my heart is broken.
Oh no. Oh.
So the answer is soon I'll know about that.
Yeah, I think I saw some raised hands. Joe, have you improvised with a cat? No. Oh, okay. I thought that was a. All right.
Nope.
Right.
with a dog during Show X. Josh, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on poor Josh?
Right.
Thank you. Josh Eckright's last dog was in the green room when he did the show. We had built a barrier. She leapt over it and came into the scene. We did a scene with her, and then I tagged her out, which was minimally successful to tap the dog, but it was the best.
Cool. I'm not sure where to fit this question, so I'll just go ahead and ask it at this point. Huge is such a tight-knit group where everyone knows each other and are all connected. Any advice for folks who want to get involved but don't really know the right people? So a question of, how do you get more involved in the community? What are the avenues there?
I could start. I think that anyone could be the right person if you're interested in working with them. Even if it's, it takes a while to get into the community. I know, like, I've been doing improv since 2014, and I came back to Minneapolis after college, and, I took classes and, really hustled, and you meet people. But the most successful thing I feel like rooted in me was finding play groups or reaching out to people, and again, being thoughtful in the asks and following through, but like, hey, I'm very interested in setting up even a one-off play group just to see how this goes. And it gives you the option, if they say, oh yeah, that sounds like a blast, to play with some people that you admire or think you get along with, chat with them about your goals, and maybe they know somebody who's also like, oh yeah, like, maybe you should talk to this person, or like, oh, that sounds really cool, let's keep talking about it. So, I mean, I think there's nothing more flattering than receiving an ask like that as an improviser. And I think, like, I don't know if it was Joe who said, like, the worst they can say is no. And mostly, probably the only time they're going to say no is if they're involved in too many other things. But they now know you, and you can continue on a conversation, maybe down the road, re-engage. So I think that, just being brave and shooting out those asks and making it non-committal. You don't have to be like, let's work together for 8 weeks. Although, like, more power to you if you make that your ask. But, setting yourself up to start having some building blocks and building your connections that way. And then you get to do improv while you do it.
Cool. Any thoughts from anyone else there? One resource that I want to point you at, I'm actually going to post this in the text chat. I just posted a URL, tinyurl.com /improv interests. It's something we just actually put together for the Now What session that Brianna and I did last week. I haven't posted it on Facebook yet, but I do need to. It's specifically designed to help people sort of assess what their particular interests within improv are, and then to help connect them to other people who may be interested in some of the same things. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in connecting with new people to fill that out. We'll be sharing the results of that without anybody's email address at the end of April, when people have had a chance to respond, in the hopes that there'll be some folks that discover, oh yeah, I want to find someone else who's really interested in slow play or improv sets of music or whatever it is, and find those inroads there. I think there's also a perception with the improv community in Minneapolis, especially if you're on the outside of it, that it is this single super cohesive bubble. And certainly I think when you get further into it, you discover that it's all kinds, it's networks of different friendships and relationships. So I think sometimes the road in is just through those one or two people or more people that you connect with, and building work with them and finding your way in that way, if that's any help. Any other thoughts?
I would just say show up to come to shows when you can, and go to those. I think lots of people won't go to an audition because they don't feel ready. And if you are in a place where you can find that 30 minutes of brave to go and do it, like that'll work wonders to just keep getting your face in front of people and interacting with people. Like those audition groups will have like warm up time, and then you get 30 minutes with them. So it's also just like an in way, if you're just trying to find any path in, is just to go before you feel ready, which Joe or Emily, somebody said way back when, jump before ready. I think that applies to auditions too.
I also want to acknowledge that this is real. We live in Minnesota, where everyone made all the friends they needed in high school. So I don't want to tell you that this is not a thing that happens. People establish those relationships, and they sort of fill their dance cards. And sometimes you kind of have to elbow your way in a little bit. So thank you for that question.
The advice on that as well. I like the way you put that, Sean. That was very humorous to me. As someone who was not from Minnesota and moved here knowing no one, I can definitely relate to that. So similar to what everyone also just said is, if there's a show you want to be a part of, like Rita said, go to that show and introduce yourself to the people in the show. And it's going to feel weird. It's going to be awkward. But if I go see The Mess that Rita Boersma's in, and I don't know Rita, but I think she's great, I can say, hi, I really liked your show. I'm Heather. I just moved here. I don't have to say anything more, but you just met someone. And that's scary, and it's hard, and it is on you. And that's unfortunate that you have to do that effort of saying hello. But more likely, Rita will say hello back. And the next time she sees me, she might recognize me. So just to start slowly and small, just go to the thing you want to be a part of and support it. And pretty soon they'll recognize that face in the crowd, and all of a sudden you might be someone's friend.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can second that to like the nth degree of, you do not need to have a full conversation, like 10-minute conversation with somebody right away. That's totally fine to just come up and say hello. Like when the Bearded Company first started at Huge, we used to hold kind of like dance parties after our show. But that was because all of us didn't really know people either. Like I had just moved back to Minneapolis after being away for like 8 years. And I didn't know anyone. So that was like our way of doing it. But then even when I like went to Show X, I remember like I had to just say hello to people that I didn't know. Like Josh Eckwright, actually, I remember like having to just be like, God, I got to introduce myself. And I felt really weird about it because I have super severe anxiety about that stuff. But I was like, no, fuck it. I have to say hello. But that's how that stuff goes. It is difficult, but yeah, know that you can start very small. That's totally fine. Most improvisers I have found are very friendly and are probably feeling the same kind of anxiety that you are.
Outstanding. On the subject of getting to know people, when it comes to a cast you're working with, especially a cast that maybe new and hasn't been working together, people you've auditioned, whatever, we had a question from somebody in our online forum about how do you get people trusting each other and on the same side and playing as a team and not just a collection of people? Any thoughts on that? Rita, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but that's a great question. This might not be the answer they're looking for, but I know I'm thinking of like shows that I've auditioned and brought in a group of people who definitely haven't worked together before, is starting small. I think sometimes we want to dive right into the structure. If it is a show that is like I'm thinking of Family Dinner when I directed that and auditioned it and brought in lots of new folks to it. It has a very specific structure that goes in a pretty specific way. And especially the year I directed, we were on a very tight timeline in terms of rehearsal. So I know that I wanted so badly to just jump in and teach the show and say like, this is how it goes. Now let's figure it out together. But to just like start with exercises, put everybody on the same level and on the same page, I think can be really valuable in building that group dynamic. And starting with exercise that maybe some of us who've been at it a million years haven't done for a million years because it's something you did forever ago, but just really leveling the playing field as much as you can. That's one tiny thought I had. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think that's actually a really good assessment. I know with a couple of the shows that we've produced, we've literally, our first meeting has been just that, just a meeting where they're like, we just bring a bunch of snacks and cake and whatever, and we just sit and talk, because leveling the playing field to a more human level will at least start to build some of that trust right away, so that they understand, like, so that everyone understands, like, we all don't even hardly know what we're getting into right now, and we're building this ship together. So let's just find out what each other, like, what things each other have. Like, what tools do you have? What tools do you have? What do you like? What do you hate? I don't know. Like, I genuinely just like getting to know people first, because it gives me a better representation of what I'm jumping into with them, and hopefully what they're jumping into with me.
I completely agree on both of those counts. Getting to know each other on a civilian level, because I feel like sometimes you can get to the end of a show and be like, I'm sorry, what do you do for like money? Like, what do you do for a job? Or like, where do you live? I don't know. We've never talked about it. It's like a lot of improv. And we've started to, at the first meeting, everybody circles up, and in addition to going around and sharing names and pronouns, we ask like, what do you do during the daytime? And what was your did you go to college? What was your undergrad degree? And like asking a different question each time, because then, I mean, we had two people that they had a connection. They both went to high school in Fargo, and like immediately right there, didn't know each other, but that strengthened the bond for them. And it gives people that might be feeling even extra uncomfortable, like, I've got a person now and I have some things in common with that person. And then you can slowly start helping everybody find those connections and sort of like coax it out of people. And we've always ended with just like 20 minutes on the clock. Let's play it out. Maybe have 3 rules, but feel each other out. And then on the end, as a producer, you can sort of keep an eye on like, who's not jumping out? Like, what are we noticing? And how can we take these just like latent observations and go forward knowing that, oh, this person seems like a little bit reticent to jump out, or this person, we know they're going to jump out every time, we're good to go. And so you can take notes, and then everybody can start to sort of feel each other out as well. And then the third thing that has worked is with our Slack channel, always having a channel, if anyone's used Slack before, that is completely unrelated to improv, where you can just share weird shit or like funny articles, and people feel free to share those types of things. And then an inspiration channel that might, if people see an article about prom in the 1980s, they can throw it up there for the group. And so you're giving folks that might not necessarily feel as vocal a chance to contribute in their ways as well, and be recognized by the group for doing some additional research too. Sorry, long answer, but.
No, lovely, thank you. All right, great, moving on from there. Tech and working with tech. I'd love to hear your stories of success or failure in working well with an improv technician. What is effective in building the best relationship and getting the best results when working with a tech in improv? Joe, let's start with you if you've got a thought.
I think the biggest advice I can ever give anyone is asking their tech before you tell them all about what you want, asking them what they're actually comfortable doing. I think a lot of times people walk in and they have like this laundry list of, we need this thing and this thing, and this has to cut exactly like this and whatever and blah, blah. I think if you have a super specific thing, it's probably a good idea to have your own tech that you have brought in specifically for your show. But yeah, I think getting to know them and finding out, what they're comfortable with, what you're hoping. For us, we generally don't have a very specific tech. We don't usually have a tech that's very specific to our shows. So we know that the tech could be rotating every week, and that's totally fine. And so every time we talk to them before the show and say, this is what we would like. Are you comfortable with that? How much of this do you feel like you can accomplish? And if they say, like, I'm not super comfortable with that, great. We will change our expectations, because that's only fair to them. They are another improviser. They are just as much of a part of the show as we are. So I think treating them that way, I think that's something that a lot of people don't give enough credit to for technicians in improv in particular, is they are just as much a part of that show as you are on stage. Probably more of it, because they can black you out. So giving them that kind of respect, I think with technicians, with anyone really, but techs, I think in particular, like, give them the respect they deserve, and they will absolutely help you as much as they possibly can. So again, expectations. It always comes back to that, expectations and communication.
Absolutely, absolutely. Emily, Rita, Heather, any thoughts there?
I think Joe pretty much covered it on my opinions of how to work with tech. If you do have a specific form, we've usually just typed out something that can be given to a tech each week. Again, like Joe said, if it's a laundry list, good luck with that. But to make sure that you have whatever core piece of information you need, or like at this point, the disco ball will go on, and just so that they can see it, and you are still going up before each show, checking in with them to make sure if they have questions, you can answer them. But then everybody's working from the same document. And if there is something that doesn't go right with tech, maybe you need to adjust your document so that you can set the tech up for success. Or like Joe said, adjust your expectations about what is that might actually be feasible.
Nice.
I have a couple of quick things. If I know one thing Huge is doing to try to help artists and techs like help build that bridge and make that easier is like we've now included that like a form that needs to be filled out ahead of time when a show has been booked and is starting their run, so that all the techs that are employed at Huge have access to that form. So techs that might benefit from knowing that information sooner can go into that document and read it, so they're not getting the information night of, when, especially at Huge, when they're maybe have to tech 3 or 4 shows in a night. They don't have to like try to store that information in their brain. They have some time to kind of sit with it and work with it. So maybe that's something your theater does, where you or could develop, where that there is access to that, or like have your own document and then do the work. I mean, chances are, I know this isn't the case everywhere, but for sure at Huge, a tech is generally scheduled ahead of time. You can find out who that is and then reach out to them a few days before, have that conversation then instead of the night you're walking into the theater. And then another thing is, and this was sort of mentioned, but just to like really say it, is feedback. If something doesn't go well in a show, yes, I totally agree to what Joe and Emily were saying, like adjust some of your expectations, but have a conversation with the tech. Some of it might have been like, ooh, that didn't go well because that can't work. And some of it might have been like, hey, I looked back and you were on your phone during our show or something like that. Like treat your tech as you would another artist, and like feedback. You don't have to be an a-hole. A conversation is important if you have feedback. And I think that makes them feel like a more involved and valued part of the show, rather than just kind of stewing with your group of like, wow, they really missed that blackout or whatever, which we all have done. So I think kind of pushing and adjusting ourselves to like, I think we're so afraid of like constructive feedback, especially delivering it. And I know it is a skill and it is hard, but like, we have to do it more. And it is a sign of like, a sign of respect of people's work that like, here's what I would love more of. Why was that hard? Can we figure it out for next week or next time? Just have the conversation instead of walking away and being mad and never mentioning it, because then nobody benefits from that. So
lovely. We do have a related question from Rich in Alaska. How do you handle it if tech really just wants to play on stage and join the troupe? Which I think we've sort of touched on. I think there may be some very specific cultural things with Minnesota improv, in that Butch Roy, who's certainly one of the pillars of the community here, has really instilled a very tech active milieu in a lot of Twin Cities improv, right? But yeah, I guess it's worth asking if you do find yourself in a situation where you feel like the tech is not meeting your expectations for how involved they'll be in your show. Any further thoughts on that? I feel like we have touched on that to a degree. Cool. Yeah, so I guess the answer is communication.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can say for sure that, just as an anecdote, I suppose, that just proves that setting those expectations early is good, because we didn't one time and we killed somebody in a show because the tech was doing their job, but we didn't we didn't talk to them about like that we don't really want to go that far, but like we told them, like we kind of had said, like, yeah, we trust you, do whatever you do, follow us, whatever. And like it just, something happened that was very unexpected for us. And all it took was, as uncomfortable as it is for Minnesotans in particular, but I think a lot of people generally, was after the show, we said, okay, we saw this happened. They also came to us and were like, I'm not sure if that was too far. And we just had to say, yes, it was. Yes, it absolutely was. But you know what? That's on us. We're trying to figure this out together.
Sure.
How can we change this for next time? So yeah, it's not like shitting on them because they did something wrong. Like, it's accepting that sometimes maybe you just didn't set expectations correctly. And so now we just have to work together, and we have to set that expectation that, yes, this is what we're expecting of you. This is how involved we want you to be within our group and within our show right now.
Great. All right. Moving on from there then, looking at shows beyond their opening. I mean, it's up on the stage, you've done the rehearsing. What do things look like for you at that point? For any one of you, what are you still doing? Are there still rehearsals going on? Are there notes being delivered? And if so, how and when are those being delivered? What's your experience there? I'll start with Heather, actually, even in the scripted world.
Well, once a show opens, you're not done marketing. You continually have to try to get butts in that seat until closing night. So that is something that I think is easily forgotten, because it feels like a front-loaded job. And then you open, and then you have a wonderful opening crowd because everybody's loved ones and friends are there, or you had some sort of cool buy one, get one deal. And then you have 6 more weeks of shows. So marketing and reminding that, like, and I know we all struggle with this, of like, everyone who's in the show has wonderful people they could tell about it, but so many people don't tell people, or they're in so many shows. But reminding folks, and it also like kind of is gross to ask, of like, hey team, please invite people to the show. I know you're in it and you feel great because you're in it. So just reminding folks that like butts in seats, because everyone wants to play to a loving crowd that's there, and rarely is a loving crowd empty. Though doing a show for one person is still an incredible experience, and they bought a ticket and they should get a delightful show that you would give a sold out crowd. I am very much of that vein. However, we all also want to share our art with more than one person at a time. So for me, it's marketing that's important to continue until it's done.
Lovely, thank you. Emily, what are your thoughts? What's the process for you folks once the show is open?
Once our show has opened, typically, and I know this differs from like, for say how Joe and the Bearded Company does theirs. We treat shows as like, that's our new improv day. Practices won't continue unless there is something that we need to work on, which we typically tell the cast up front that there may or may not be another rehearsal after our first or second night, just to address anything or make any additional tweaks. Additional things. Notes as a director, producer, player are kind of weird because you are in the show with them. We will typically do notes by honestly just taking the temperature of the room at the end and listening to what the other players felt and how they felt the show went. I'd say when you are a director that's in your own show, you have to treat your own reactions with like an additional lens of like whether or not this is a helpful thing to say, because there's some things that you need to, as the leader, maybe hold in and discuss offline. But yeah, so we'll do like notes at the end, make sure everyone is good, and then it's really just chatting, like Heather said, every week, being like, hey guys, another show's coming up, and there's 20 tickets sold, so what can we do? And also just creating a space to celebrate your work during the week. What's more fun than, I will try personally to just be like, shout out to this one inside joke that we had at our show, and let people celebrate those funny moments throughout the week to keep you engaged and keep your cast having fun and celebrating the wins.
Nice. Rita, thoughts?
Yeah, I've done all the things that people have mentioned, and just as you go in, communicate what your plan is, because like in a scripted world, often the director sees you all the way through the rehearsal process and maybe opening night, and then their job is done, and that it is less true in some improv situations because that show is ever changing. But also, does a director, if you're outside, if you're not in the group, like have to be at every show? No. Can they be? Sure. But talking to the cast and making sure the cast feels taken care of, that they know, like, I'll be at 4 or whatever, or know when you're going to be there. And if the director's not going to be there, having instilled the process so they know how to work through feedback and processing a show once it's done. I found a lot of success too, kind of what Emily was saying, maybe doing kind of more of a quicker check-in, temperature check post-show. And then I have a Facebook group or some form of community where longer notes, like, and it can be delivered there. And for me, as someone who is, I really process through writing, like that is helpful. I feel like I give better notes if I can take a minute to like be away from the show, be away from the night, look at my notebook, and then like really write out my thoughts from the show and the feedback that I want to give. But again, I would set that up ahead of time, being like, here are how my notes are going to come out. I expect that the cast reads them every week so that it isn't a surprise going into the next week. Like if something I mentioned in the notes, I sometimes have done jokes, like if they're really long ones, we're like on item number 6, I'm like, if you've reading this far, please send me a GIF of a bird right now so that I know you've read this. So, all the things.
Gotcha. Joe, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I basically would just echo all of that. I think a lot of it just ends up being show to show, depending on what the show needs. I think never expecting to do everything the same every single time. It is just an adjustment thing, feeling out what the cast needs and what the show needs. So yeah, I mean, for us, like when it's a main company show with the Bearded Company, we still meet every week. And sometimes those meetings look a little different depending on the show. But, you know, and when it's a produced show of ours, those meetings look different too. And sometimes, yeah, we're like, that show went great. Everyone, you know what? Let's just take a week off because we all deserve it. We need 1 week just to let our brains rest, you know? So, yeah.
Wonderful. And then the last big topic I have, which is very topical, not in-person shows, online shows and otherwise. We've had a lot of questions about people's experiences with rehearsing and or performing in other formats right now when we're all homebound. I'd love to hear any successes or honestly any challenges or failures you've experienced in what has worked for that. Anybody have any stories to share?
The Theater of Public Policy, we've had a success. This was in the middle of our spring run, which was every other Monday for 3 months. And of course, the world ended. Right. But what it has done for us is we do an Armando format where we have an expert that is interviewed, and that's the Armando content for the improv montage. We've been able to work with interviewees, experts, guests from nationwide now because of the Zoom format. So that's been a nice frame of, oh, we are still doing it on Zoom. And now we don't have to think locally who can come to the theater. We can work with people nationwide. So that's a success of a way to look at this.
Amazing. What have others been doing? Joe?
I think I've been watching Comedy Sports Twin Cities. And actually Comedy Sports in general around the world have been doing, I think, really well setting up virtual shows for themselves. I've been really impressed by that. I'd say, I mean, not to I'm probably biased, but I am impressed. I think they rehearse it and they figured out how to make it operate smoothly. So it still feels like you're watching a regular, there goes an ambulance. You're watching a regular comedy sports match in a theater.
Sure.
And then as far as like the Bearded Company is concerned, we've done a couple of shows and we recognize that you don't have to force any one show into a Zoom thing. Don't feel like you need to do a virtual show. If you don't feel like it's going to work, that's okay. That's fine. We realized that the show we had just opened, Bearded High, just probably wasn't going to work as a Zoom format. So we've now done 2 shows of our Dungeons and Dragons style show instead, because we knew that would fit into a virtual format much easier. So I think it's just recognizing that you might have to make some adjustments or do a show that's not your typical show.
Nice. Now, am I mistaken in thinking that the Beards have been doing a podcast version of that show, or is that
you are correct. Yeah, we started a podcast a few months ago, and then, like Heather said, the world ended. So now,
well, that's good timing. Okay.
And it's a great podcast.
Thank you.
Rita, what have your experiences been like with online performance format?
Yeah, and Joe brought up Comedy Sports. I think that has been so fascinating to watch in a Zoom format. And I think it lends itself so well to it because it is such a highly structured thing. So I think just it really forces us to break down what our shows look like and how can we apply them in this way. And to some, it works very well. I also think Foul Play is a great example of one and Sean, you can speak to it, or Heather, you're both in that I've watched a couple times of the online version, that you've developed a way to sort of break down that structure into like a pod format where something like Zoom still makes that feel like a great experience. It's a different show, but it's still sort of I just think it's really, you've gone down to what the bones of a show are, and then can it apply in some virtual setting. The Mess, we do we do the worst possible use of technology every Saturday. We just all post Instagram stories as if they're scenes responding, but we're all responding at the same time. So it never lines up. And to us, that is the charm of many of it's just as incoherent as our live shows. but on Instagram. And so I think like, yeah, what is taking a thread, like a bare bone, like, I don't know, spine of your show and what, and not just Zoom, what sort of virtual thing, the podcast or the beards, for example.
Sure.
It's been interesting to watch that, but those are the other ones I've been involved in.
Wonderful. Emily, anything from you?
We're not doing anything via Zoom.
Great.
We are in the camp that our prom night show is set up for May and June, and we made the decision that just given the circumstances and given our structure that it wasn't a conducive format for us, or to take our cast's time and revamp with such a short turnaround time. A thing I've been hearing at work that I think is also helpful here is like it's that we're not all working from home. We're in the middle of a crisis trying to work from our houses. And so I really admire everyone who is moving their stuff to Zoom. And I think that if you are inspired and that you have the capacity to do that, like, hell yeah. We are of the camp where we're really hoping for those live audiences where we can see everyone's smiling faces after this whole thing is done.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that goes to Joe's point that, yeah, not everything needs to be an online show. It's okay to take the time right now. Sandra asked if people could post links in the chat to online stuff that is happening. I know Joe posted the Bearded Break the Dice campaign. We also have a lot of those shows still posting to Huge's performance calendar. So The Mess and Jill's Dumb Machine, Face Jam on Thursdays. So a lot of that stuff that's happening online, you can just find right on our calendar, which is great. A question from Will. This seems like a simple question, but if you're doing a Zoom show, are you usually sitting, or have you set up your camera so you can perform more physically? Great question.
I think that was one of the cool things that I think the comedy sports shows are doing, which I think I played one of them last week and it was weird, but also so valuable, is they in rehearsal made sure that everybody's camera was in a place and then placed us as performers like where we would be for the show, so that it was like waist up and really use the weirdness of of your situation, but to really physically engage as much as you can. And it was fun to watch, and it was very freeing to do. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about, if you can still kind of get the sound and lighting and things that you need for the show. But I know it was something that Comedy Sports was very conscientious of, and I think to their success, like it was great.
I agree. With the Theater of Public Policy, our first rehearsal was stand up, because that's how you usually do improv. And what's in the space? What is going to annoy you? Like if there's a table right here, move it. Just like Rita was saying, making sure you have the things you need. Also making sure the camera's at eye level, because that's how you would talk to a human, instead of this upshot or like way up here, like sexy selfie time. Try to keep it where you can see and you're looking into people's eyes. Also, I share a wall with neighbors, letting them know you're doing a show or rehearsal.
Amazing. That's definitely advice I've read online is yeah, if there's a way for you to be standing, that can be really helpful, just because you will be more engaged. I happen to have a convertible standing height desk, which is what I'm at right now. And I've been alternating between sitting and standing throughout this, and man, does it help. All right. Let me see if we got any other questions. All right, we're getting all those links in there. That's fabulous. Yeah, finishing off, if anyone else in our audience has any questions, feel free to type those in. In the meantime, let me ask the four of you, what do you wish you had known going into creating your first show? What's your biggest piece of advice for someone who might be trying this for the first time? So Joe, or Heather, you look
I'm going to jump in because mine is something that was given to me that I basically asked that question, and it's to decide for yourself per project what success is. Because if you think success, because if success can be anything, you're in charge of what that looks like, but it helps you set your own personal expectations. We've talked a lot about setting expectations for the group, but if your expectation is a 7 p.m. show sold out to 300 people, that is not a bad expectation or a version of success. You just then have to pursue that. But if it's, I want to do a show for the first time and have fun, that's a great success. That way you're not worried with numbers or how amazing your technology that you had tried are, or your success could be, I really want to try something with disco balls. Like knowing what your success is, so that when it's over, you can measure your expectations to that version of success instead of someone else's quality of success.
Fantastic. Joe.
Yeah, I think I think that's really really great advice. I think also just being aware that it is a lot of work to put together a show, and that you will miss things, and that's okay that you miss stuff. You take it as a moment to learn something so that you try something different next time, and that the world will not end because you didn't do one thing the exact way you think you should have. And I think the biggest advice I can give anyone, because this is advice that I'm terrible at taking myself, is accept help from other people. You absolutely do not have to do it all by yourself. It feels like that, and sometimes you're just like, no, I can handle doing this. I can handle doing the marketing and the directing and producing this thing and putting this thing together. No, like
that.
Ask and accept help, please.
Wonderful. Emily.
Oh, these are all so good. I think something else that I constantly personally have to take my own advice is just like knowing that your idea at the beginning of a show process or even just a rehearsal process, like your idea of what's going to happen is probably not going to happen to a T, and that you need to be flexible and forgiving if what I think, I'm pretty like, I'm a lady that knows what I'm looking for, and if the result that I'm expecting is not happening, knowing that that we don't need to just keep doing it until what I think is supposed to happen happens, but taking a step back and being like, this is where we're at. Maybe I need to go back and reflect, or maybe this is the new direction of how the show is going to go. But being able to get stuck out of my own opinions on what I would like to see and letting the show build itself with everyone involved. Because if I get too invested in my point of view, I'm not helping the team achieve our goals of what this show is going to be at the end. So just trying to pull myself out of what I want to happen. I would recommend that's going to save a lot of people's sanity and relationships going down.
Wonderful. Rita.
Say it with me now. Communication. I mean, yes, but actually literally Joe stole mine with his last thing is, as I wish when I was starting that I had accepted more help. Like I felt like that in the beginning, I felt like a failure, like, oh, I can't do this part of it. And really to the detriment of some of my early projects, just trying to take it all on, and also working with people who were like, once I sort of went over that hump, I was in a group, sort of the first a million years ago, the first iteration of Neutrino, the four of us that put that on, like the four producers. And Eric Noble will speak to this. Like he was just someone who he couldn't, like his idea was that everybody should be doing all of it all the time. Like we all have to think about it. Like the idea of delegation in a project was not there yet. And like that somebody could handle different parts of it. So I think that was a very valuable lesson that I learned early on, value of letting other people in and like knowing that isn't your failure, it is to your success. So yeah.
Wonderful. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to give a couple plugs here and then we'll call it a day. The first is, if you found this helpful or you want more of this, I really want to encourage you to check out, we are offering an online class with Phil Peterson coming up starting May 17th. Build your own show from crazy idea to lights up. So if you're looking to take some of this and turn it into something practical, that is a wonderful opportunity to do that. I really encourage you to hop on over to Huge's website and check that out. This session, as all the ARIS Summit sessions, are completely free. And we're so happy to have you here. If anyone is inclined to give, we're certainly facing a rough time right now with the closure. And givehuge.com is a link that will take you to wonderful ways to donate. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much to our panel. You all have been fantastic and insightful. And go and enjoy some of that sunshine.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.